you doing? It's such a loaded question. They still
Yeah.
say, how are you? But, what's
I'm
going
I don't know how I am. Like
Yes.
question, right? When someone says, "How are you?" You say, "Oh, I'm fine," but there's so many things going on. I don't think anybody is really actually fine.
I know.
But
I
we're
know.
encouraged to really talk about how we're feeling in
Yeah.
general society, right? So I think I'm okay. But there are lots of hard things to explain to children these days.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I think that can be difficult sometimes, but I mean, we have to deal with challenges as they come.
Yeah. I recorded that session with my friend Ricky, and I sent it to you because I wanted that like honest opinion about what's going on, right? And
Hmm.
as I said in the video, I had to deal with my own biases and my own learnings. And
Hmm.
even though I look like this, I still had um, my preconceptions of reality that weren't true, right? So I've been going through that, and as you said, having conversations with my son about
Hmm.
everything that's going on. But I just wanted to kind of like just openly talk to you, like
Sure.
you know what's been the most difficult thing. I know this is not new, and this is what's bothering everyone,
Hmm.
especially because it's like you're just noticing that because social media is all over it, but we've been
Hmm.
living in this reality forever.
For a very long time,
I
for hundreds
know.
and
So,
hundreds of years.
and I've been trying to be very conscious of all those, like, how are you feeling? How are you dealing with this? You've been dealing with this forever. Like, it's
Yes.
bullshit. So it's like, what do you expect from, friends and allies and like
Hmm.
really people that want to do something about it when we talk about Black Lives Matter and
Yeah.
you know, biases and privilege, whatever you want to start.
I mean, there's so many places. I think I can start with like just the biases. I think everyone has biases, right? Whether it just be seeing a Mexican, right? When after hearing everything that our president had said, and that incited fear for people who had never met a Mexican. That's their only experience of what a Mexican might be. So I think we have to be very careful about how we use our words and who we speak to and who we choose to share our lives with. So like even for me, when you say you have bias, I have bias. Like even within my own community, there's a separation of, I might cross. I heard you say you crossed the street when you saw a guy coming. I might cross the street too, but not necessarily because he's Black, but because I'm a female. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So many layers to bias, right? And that man might not have hurt me, but I have been conditioned to make sure as a woman I don't put myself in bad situations, right? So I think just being aware of what your biases are is really the first step. And then it's really education. I think I've been approached by a lot of people like, okay, tell me your experience and what can I do? And it's wonderful to have people actually start asking. But at the same time, I am now of interest to you because I have information you don't have.
Yes.
Right? So it's more of, self-education is important. Reading is important. And I don't mean social media reading. I mean, go look at our historical figures and read our experience through James Baldwin or Maya Angelou or Toni Morrison. Like read our stories and really try to
Mm-hmm.
understand before you enter into a conversation, because then
Yes.
at least you have some background. And then the conversation is, well, I read this. What does it mean to you? And then you actually have some foundation to kind of build upon. And I would also say, like, be genuine. I think I've gotten a lot of questions, and I think people genuinely want to know, but they didn't want to genuinely be my friend,
Yes.
right? So I think there's a disconnect there. If you want the information, you actually have to build these relationships because these are very, very deep and sometimes painful conversations.
Yes.
And some of the things that I've even gone through, some of the things that my 14-year-old son has already gone through, or my experiences with the police. Like that's not something that you just jump into. So I kind of expect people, anyone, right,
Mm-hmm.
to be genuine and do some self-education. If you don't know where to start in education, the first question is, what can I read to better understand?
Mm-hmm.
Where can I go to to personally get information,
Mm-hmm.
and then let's have a conversation about what I learned.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best approach. And remember that there's a whole person behind that. There's
Yes.
a whole individual. I can't tell you about the entire Black experience.
Yes.
I can tell you about my experience. I can tell you what I've learned over the years. I can tell you what my parents taught me. And there is a difference for me from being like an immigrant family versus being raised in generational in America. There is a different history. So you have to speak to multiple people to understand the experience, really, right? It's not just me. It's not just your one Black friend. It's speak to people as if you genuinely want to know them.
Yes.
Because you want something from them. And I've felt that a lot. Like, you just want me to tell you what my experience is and tell people, tell me what to do. And it's like, I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you where I am. And if you really want to be an ally, you have to be an ally when I'm not in the room.
Yes.
To be an ally when there's nothing but white faces and something is being said that doesn't sit well, you have to be brave enough to call it out. The same way we have to be brave enough to call it out for ourselves, and sometimes stand by ourselves and say, that sounds racist. And then there's always the reaction, oh my gosh, no. Like, no, don't mitigate my feelings. That was hurtful. That was a bad comment. You shouldn't have said it. And that has to happen when we're not around.
Yeah.
And because, like, silence is approval. If you don't say anything, you're allowing it to happen. You may not be a racist, but you're an enabler. And do you want to be an enabler, or do you want to be an ally? And I think people have to decide what they really want to be.
I've been very active, posting stuff on social media, and I've seen the reaction of some of my friends that might not be longer following me or connecting with me again because it's uncomfortable and nobody wants to be uncomfortable. I watch 13th on Netflix, and for me, I think that was the defining point between before what I thought I knew and after, right? The idea of there's really an emancipation of slavery. However, you create this loophole where it allows you to still have people slaves as long as they're criminals. So you start charging these people with whatever, right?
Everything.
With whatever, to then say, well, they went to prison, so now I have the right to have them as slaves. And it had become what our reality is right now, and the whole situation with the police. But it was something that was ingrained not just in white and non-Black communities, but also Black communities. There's an assumption that we are inherently bad and we're criminals, and this is what is expected from us. So as you said, it's not just like it's education for everyone, and how, that for me was huge, and it had allowed me to better understand the issue, still not fully, because I haven't been through that specific experience of being part of that community, but it definitely helped me to better understand the situation and have better conversations about it. Do you think it's easier to now call it out just because everything that's going on? As you said, like, to still bring up the topic, or you still feel kind of funny about it?
I don't think it was ever easy, especially when you're in a room with people that are friends.
Yes.
Okay? Because I have lots of friends, but they really are acquaintances or coworkers and not necessarily friends. Yes. Because when these difficult topics come up, it is uncomfortable. It's not uncomfortable for me, but I can see it's uncomfortable for them. And it's a matter of wanting to listen or not. And you can tell who wants to listen because they won't leave the room and they won't squirm, or they'll say I'm uncomfortable, but I want to know, right? But most people will try to avoid. So it's a matter, it's not that it's ever easy, but I don't think it's any more difficult at the same time. I think there's still, it's just a part of our lives. And even for me, I have to take a step back and say, how much of this have I dealt with, and I no longer label it because this is just life, right? I think for a lot of us, we were outraged about George Floyd. However, none of us were surprised.
Yes.
It was just normal for us. And for a lot of people, it was outrage because they were so shocked that it could happen. And for us, it's like, this has been happening for hundreds of years, and we are traumatized because it is now televised. It's on Instagram. We watch these things over and over, and there's a psychological component that we just turn off the switch after a certain point, and we come desensitized to it. And a lot of people say, well, why don't you just fight? And it's like, we've been fighting, right? And it's one of those things where we've been fighting so hard, and why don't you, and why don't you, and why don't you? I had someone tell me, why don't you run for office? And I'm like, what do you mean? That's not my passion. That's not my skill set. Oh, you'd be really good at it. You can change all of this. And my response was, well, why don't you run for office? Because you can change all of this, right? And I was speaking to a white person when they said that. And it was just like, now you're imposing. And it was all well-intentioned, but I felt very imposed upon around the action that I should be taking.
It's still your responsibility.
Community. It's my responsibility, right? And it's not. It's our responsibility, because there's so many things from a social economic, from a regular economic. There's so many levels of things that are broken in this system that one person cannot change it. And it's like we as a community have just, and we're still oppressed, but we have just over the last 50 years made progress, right? We now have Black billionaires and millionaires and people who can actually influence things. That wasn't true 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. Not even 100 years ago was that true, right? So there aren't enough of us to actually influence and change the system. So we do need the allies to come in and help change the system and do right from wrong, right? Like you mentioned, the prison roundup. I grew up in Harlem in the 80s, where it was the height of the crack epidemic. I lived through that, right? I saw people getting snatched off the street for no apparent reason. I saw people get snatched off the street for a dime bag of weed, which is now legal. Mm-hmm. They're still in jail. Right? Like, it's just so very broken. So it's not one person, it's a whole, and I don't even know what the solution is at the same time. It's like we need change, but what is the actual solution? That's a question that I often ask, like, what can we actually do? We can have the conversations, but then what? Are we just going to talk about it? What are the actions and the steps that we need to take to dismantle the system that is so huge and so oppressive? Like, it feels like an impossible battle.
And I think in that is like in my coaching approach, right? We break it down. Let's break it down into little steps. So, George Floyd happened. Everyone is like, oh my God, this is happening. And let's post the black square on Instagram and let's do all these different things. But I said, okay, what can I actually do? So I went online and checked, am I registered to vote? Did I order my vote by mail
registration?
Ballot, right? Am I able to get, despite of whatever's going on out there, or am I going to be able to exercise my right to vote? And so okay, that's one check. I have a platform. I write a blog every week. Am I talking about this subject? Am I providing some resources that help me, right? Doesn't mean that I have all the answers, but am I doing something about it? Okay.
Yeah.
Am I starting these conversations in the other platforms I have, like work, that before those touchy subjects, we wouldn't touch it at work. Like, oh, we're not going to talk politics. We're not going to talk religion. We're not going to talk, race. Now we have to welcome, invite, and actually, start those conversations. So that's how I feel when you said, what do we do? What actions can we take? So I think one is like, if you really want to be an ally, start having these conversations in the platforms that you have and the places where you operate, but also become the better freaking version of you that you can be. And that's something that I've always admired about you. And you always, joke about secure the bag. And it's like, really, I watch you. We worked together when I first, was moving here, and it was all like, sweetheart, and I don't know what to do.
And both.
I know. And then it was like, and I was going through my own, situation and experiences. I still can't speak English too well.
You're doing so much better. You're fine.
We joke so much about that, but one thing that you always, told me, but also showed me was, go after what you want, and for me, that occupy spaces that were meant for you, right?
Mhm,
I'm not just going to be the customer service representative. I'm going to be the manager. I'm going to be the director. I'm going to be
mhm,
the freaking CEO of the world. Like, I'm going to have all these investments. I'm going to save and
mhm.
go into both, like, not just race, but also gender, right?
Yes.
And it's so many layers of the battles that we have to
Yeah,
navigate.
100%.
But then, you know what, going back to that, those are the things that I think I can be doing.
Mhm.
And I think some people are trying to do the same, but some people are waiting for kind of the pat in the back and like, you're doing a great job. And
Then they're not doing it for the right reasons, right? If you're
ah,
looking for a pat on the back, that's not the right reason to do it. You do it because it's right. Um, for me, it's like, and I try to tell my kids this: it's you don't do something for someone expecting something back.
mhm,
You give and you're kind and you're selfless when it counts. You are never to expect anything back. You did it because it was the right thing to do,
mhm,
and that should be gratification enough, right? Like you said something interesting with occupying spaces that we're not supposed to be. And I think for an entire Black community, we're not supposed to be anywhere but as a servant kind of, or lower positions, or in jail. We're not supposed to be. I've had teachers actually hold me back from a school that I got into because they felt the school that I was in was good enough. And that's a real fourth grade. I got accepted. I tested into a school. I needed a recommendation. She hid the recommendation. We missed the deadline. My mother met to meet the teacher, and she said, this school is good enough. And that's just one thing, right? Like there are things that I probably don't even know about, and opportunities that I didn't get just because, or when my name is Natalia. So when people phone screen me, I speak this way. But how I speak to my friends and family, I would probably never get a job, because even the dialect, or my accent, or how I speak where I'm from, Hall, if I'm saying, you know what I'm saying, what's up, what's popping, if I come into an office that way, I am automatically uneducated,
mhm,
and I'm just not smart at all, and I would not be invited to sit at the table
mhm.
if I spoke that way. Even if you could understand exactly what I was saying, even if I relayed the the message,
Message.
I still would not be accepted, because just the way that I speak, just the way that I truly am, is not accepted, right? It's, oh, that's ghetto, or somehow beneath. Even for you with your accent, we had lots of jokes about it, but people will assume that you don't have an education simply because of the way you speak English. And that's another bias that we need to stop. Like, it just needs to stop. People need to
Mhm,
their full selves and be able to be themselves and be accepted for what they say and for the content, not what you look like, not what you sound like, but what is the content? What are you trying to convey? And does that part matter? And if it does, that's it. So I was never supposed to be a chief or a manager or a director. Um, but my grandmother came to America and brought 6 kids one by one to America. And before she passed away, she and I had like many conversations. And one of them was, I knew I was sacrificing the relationships with my children to work in people's houses and scrubbing floors, and never being, available as a mother, because I wanted my grandchildren to have better than me. So
mhm,
I can't fail her. And we have so many stories of the sacrifices that others make for us. It's, you can't let them down. So regardless of me not supposed to be in this space, I don't care. I have to go be in that space. But there are a lot of people that are not like me, who did not get that support or those instructions as they were growing up, and they're stuck in that cycle. And that's where I try to, like, just like you, within my community and within, the people that I speak with and the nonprofit that I work with, I want to try to help the people who are stuck, and or financially stuck, emotionally stuck, and try to get them to a place where they understand what their worth is and secure that bag. It's very, very important, and not for greedy reasons, but foundationally, generational wealth is what really actually changes things. When you have influence and power, and you do the right things with it, it can be an amazing change to an community.
Can you speak to that? You navigating corporate America and kind of like, as you said, like I'm not supposed to be the supervisor. I'm not supposed to be the manager. I'm not supposed to be director, chief. How do you go about that?
You fight, and I've had to fight for positions before. Even before where I'm working now, when I used to work in the bank, I had to fight for a position because someone who was not as qualified, less tenure, who clearly should not have gotten a promotion, got a promotion over me. I had to say, well, first, can you give me feedback? Let's have some emotional intelligence. Maybe there's something I'm missing. And there was nothing. There was no feedback. There was nothing genuine that I needed to work on. There was no reason why I didn't. They just liked that person better. And they happened to be a fair-skinned person. So it was one of those things where I had to say, that's not right. And I'm going to speak up about it. And when you're in a bank environment, you see these people every single day. Not like you go to a different branch. So that became a little intense, but I think you have to speak up for yourself. I never felt like I was in danger, but I was definitely being discriminated against. And you just have to speak up. And even if you're the only one speaking, because I was the only one, and there are people in the corner saying, yeah, girl, you should do it, but they wouldn't stand with me, right? They weren't gonna put a label on their back, but you have to stand up and you have to fight. And sometimes you have to leave and find the environments that will allow you to thrive. Because I was never going to thrive in that environment. So I left and I found another environment, which I met you. And it was a little bit different there because, I mean, we had a crazy boss, but it was a little bit different in the fact that it was a company that turned into something and allowed me to grow with it. Yeah. And the owners, as I got to know them, were allies. And they did not believe in a lot of the things that were going on. And it also happens that they are also immigrants. Yes. So it really is, if you can't stand up, if you're not allowed to like really stand up and make the change where you are, you have to leave and you have to find environments that are conducive to your growth and support you. So that's really how I went about it. It was, if I'm fighting and I'm not getting anywhere, I have to find somewhere else where my talent and what I'm doing is appreciated. And that's where you have to go. And sometimes you have to do things for yourself as well. Like if you're in a place where you don't have opportunity, create things for yourself, which is a lot of what Harlem is. All the vendors on the street, all those guys selling water, they're not ghetto, they're entrepreneurs, and they're figuring out, like, if society doesn't want me to have a 9-to-5 job because they've all applied, if you say you look at me and you don't like my work history and you don't think I'm smart enough, fine, I'll go sell water, I will go hustle and figure out a way to do something. And Eric Garner, that's exactly what he was doing. He was selling cigarettes because that was what he had. That's what he could do to support his family, and he died for it. Mm-hmm. That same hustle is what America is supposed to be built on, right? It's supposed to be, come here and it's the land of dreams. And when people try to actually create something out of nothing, it's illegal. Mm-hmm. Right? And there are a lot of things that were legal that should have never been, which is also a debate. Like slavery was legal, but it was wrong morally, right? Arresting people for a dime bag and putting them in jail to 5 to 7 years. That was legal, but it's a harsh punishment for a nonviolent crime. So there are a lot of things that, you just have to deal with and avoid and try to overcome. And you just fight. You just keep fighting. And I understand people who are tired of fighting because some people have given up. And even from a psychological standpoint, they're just stuck in their own prison because of all the challenges they have to face every day.
I was thinking about that the other day. As you said, it gets to a point that we just make it normal and we just said this is part of life. And I'm kind of thinking with this whole movement now. Some people that were like, oh, come on, I had already kind of like put that away, said this is part of life, and now I have to be active and fight and have an
Mhm.
opinion, and people will call me to have a call at 7:30 a.m. in the morning to
Yes.
discuss this. Like, this is new. So, I can see the frustration
Mhm.
in that too, and I'm trying to be very conscious of that.
Mhm.
Um, One thing that I've been noticing more and more is the probably before we'll just kind of like, oh, that's normal, you wouldn't pay attention, but are those like microaggression, little comments, like
Mhm.
little things that happen? What are some of the most common ones that you hear,
Oh
so we can
gosh.
like help people notice these things as well?
For me, I have so many. It happens daily. And that's the thing that people don't understand. Like, it happens literally daily. I had someone come up to me and say, oh, I was speaking to my Dominican friend, and this is a white lady. I was speaking to my Dominican friend, and I just realized that it's impacting them too. How are you? What? What is I've had someone touch my hair. That's a big one. Um, I think, just Black women and their hairstyles, just leave us alone. Like, it just stop. Just say, if it looks nice to you, just say it looks nice, give a compliment, move on. Don't touch. You wouldn't just randomly touch someone else's body. Like, I don't know why people think it's okay to just touch you. Even when you are pregnant, people just think they can touch your belly. Like, this is my body. You did not ask permission, so
Mhm.
don't do that. Um, my favorite one is when I go to conferences and things, and my position is on my tag or my my lanyard or whatever, and sometimes it's turned upside down, or it flips over, and people shake your hand and they say, hello, who are you? And then you say, oh, this is where I am. Oh, there's this, you shouldn't be there.
Yes.
Oh, and where did you go to school? Right. And then there's this insidious curiosity as to, how did this Black person figure our world out? How did you get here? Why are you in that position? Where did you go to school? Who do you know? How did you get there? Because it can't be by hard work, sweat, blood, and tears. No, no, no. You must have had, are you part of some program? Were you gifted?
Talking.
Right? And when people kind of find out, oh, you have a master's degree, oh, it's the shock of it all, right? Like, that's the biggest one that I get, is just the shock of, well, how did you get that? Like, I had someone ask me how I got my watch, and I didn't know what they were asking. I'm like, I went to the store and I brought it. Like, I don't. They're like, oh, it's expensive though, right? So things like that. Like, they can't hide their shock sometimes that
Yeah.
you might have more than them, or you might be educated, or you might be more than what they thought. Because when people first meet me, they don't assume that I am accomplished or successful, ever. Like, never. And that hurts me a lot, because even within my own community, people don't assume it. Like, there's this thing that Black people are not successful.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was a white man and said I'm all these things, it would be accepted. It'd be like,
Normal.
oh, that's what I accept. Yeah, that's facts. Right?
Expected.
It's expected. So I think that's the biggest one for me, is all the things that go around kind of being successful and educated is such a shock to just about every new person that I meet. It is hardly ever accepted. Just like, okay, that makes sense.
The whole, you're so lucky. I get that so many times. Like when I get, where you working out? Oh, you're so lucky. You're always lucky. Wait,
Oh yeah,
lucky? You're so
lucky,
lucky for like, working
because
in
you
the
shouldn't be
supermarket
there.
and
You got
16 years.
lucky.
Yes. Like, how
Yeah.
lucky you are. That's
Yeah,
great.
aren't you grateful that something was handed to me?
Oh, it's,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah. It's
I
like,
know.
how do you feel? Aren't you grateful? Aren't you excited? It's like, yeah, I'm excited at the hard work that I put into this position. I'm not like, there's no savior that gave me this. Like, I did this. So, I mean, or the fact that, oh, you started a business? What?
Uh-huh.
How did you do that? Like, everybody else. Like, I don't know how to answer those questions, but I usually answer with some type of, I'm sorry, Alexa's going off.
No worries.
Alexa, stop. See, this is the time that I get up.
Thank you so much.
What was I saying? I forget, but yeah. It's just, it's funny sometimes. I address these things with sarcasm and humor, and very rarely do I have to be forceful with it. Sometimes people go too far, and you have to address it. But yeah, I've actually touched someone's hair back. I said, "Oh, it's so straight and stringy," and they were like taking it back, and I was like, "Uh-huh."
Exactly.
They got it. And it's a certain comfort level, of course, with the person. Oh. But yeah, I had this lady, she touched my hair, and I was just like, oh, okay. So I touched her hair right back. And sometimes you have to, again, you have to defend yourself, and you also have to make sure. For me, I had to learn to stop internalizing. Mm-hmm. That's dangerous. And it was causing a lot of stress and even depression, like sadness, and you just feel unworthy. And you question your place in the world when you internalize these things. So I think if there's anything that comes out of this, it's make sure, like when it comes to microaggressions, like you don't internalize them. Their ignorance is not your problem. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a hard lesson for me to learn, because I was carrying all that with me. And then you start having overreactions to things, right? When someone is being genuine about something, you're having a reaction thinking that everything is racist because you have all this carrying around. So there's a lot to kind of unpack to make sure that you're having appropriate reactions. Mm-hmm. There's also the don't be the angry Black woman reaction.
I was about to say that. Then you get labeled as you have to carry so much shit. I'll bleep that.
Let that go.
That it's like you're like walking on eggshells all the time, right? And it's just like you're about, and so you're angry, you're aggressive, you're like mad all the time. Well, how do you want me to deal with all this bullshit all day long?
Exactly. I think, but for me, I've given up on that. When I'm angry, you know that I'm angry. Mm-hmm. I just try to make sure that I'm reacting to the actual situation and not like being everything with me. But I don't hide that I'm angry anymore. I don't hide those difficult conversations. Like, well, what did you mean by that? I'll ask. Mm-hmm. And then that person has to really sit and think about, oh, what did I mean by that? Mm-hmm. That sparks a conversation because they realize that wasn't right. And I didn't intend, right? Like they realize their own bias. So I allow myself to be angry. I allow myself to, express when I'm angry or happy or sad or whatever it is. And whatever society's reaction is to that is, if there's a place for conversation, great. If there isn't, I don't care anymore.
Yeah. Have you discovered yourself noticing your own discrimination against like older people? Have you noticed like it's something that you now like say, well, actually I am doing the same thing, the same stuff too, like this
even
or that.
Even before this, I realized, like, so I went to Thailand in 2014. Mm-hmm. An example of me, like when you travel and you go to other places, and I didn't go to a resort. Like I traveled through the country. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to see how people lived. I wanted to like really understand the culture. So it was really a culture trip. And that I learned what I thought Thailand was and what I thought those people were was completely wrong and ridiculous even. And it was a lot of self-education. It was, just food. Right? Like there's certain things in America that we don't eat, and they don't eat cows in Thailand. It's not a thing. To them, that's like eating a rat. It's a sin. It's they're a holy creature. So for me, just in that and thinking, why is my food and what I eat any more superior than your food and what you eat? Right? So like I would turn my nose up to, oh my gosh, you would eat a cricket? That's disgusting. Why would you eat a cricket? But at the same time, like that's the community and that's what was available. And that's protein. It's food, right? It might grow because I didn't grow up that way, but I imagine if I grew up there, I wouldn't know the difference. It would not be anything different. So like even being from the Caribbean, it's like we'll eat oxtail. There's, you know, like pig feet. They're like, there are things that we will eat. And then I come to America and they're like, oh my God, you'll eat a chicken foot? And it's like, well, that's what my grandmother gave me. Yeah. But it was so, and I never, like, that was in elementary school when I, you know, was telling people about it. And they were like, oh my God, you're so gross. I went through that. And then I was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's not just like race and gender, it's also cultures that we can be biased against, or, and that could be hurtful to someone else. Like you're saying the thing that my grandmother or my mother cooked and served me and fed me and nourished me is disgusting to you. That's hurtful.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think we all, like I said before, we all have biases, and they're all things that we're just unconscious of. And the minute that you become conscious, then you have a responsibility.
Yes.
And you have to listen. I think there's a lot of feelings and not enough listening. When someone says that hurts, it's not, oh, I didn't mean it. It's, oh my gosh, why did that hurt? Okay, I need to be more careful. Mm-hmm. Right? It's really trying to understand versus trying to kind of just push aside how people are feeling. If you hurt someone, it doesn't matter if you use your attention or not. The fact is you did, and you have a responsibility there. Yeah.
I think one of the hardest thing going through this time for me, it's being a parent, right? And you mentioned like the difficult conversation with our kids. Dylan's 10 now. And I avoided watching George Floyd's video. Like I didn't want to watch it. For a long
time. Me too.
He watched it. I didn't realize he had watched it. He watched it by himself in his room. And then he comes to me, he's crying. And I'm like, what's going on, baby? And he's like, Mom, what is this? Like, why is this happening? What? And it was just, and I've always been like really good at having conversations about whatever. Like some other parents have said, are you really saying that to your kid? I'm like, if it's smart enough to put the question together, we'll give him an answer.
He's smart enough to understand. Yeah.
And then, so we've had, you know, other difficult conversations, but this was just so hard because it's like his question, it was more about what are we doing, what can we do, right? It's like we're gonna watch this, but what are we doing about this? So I said, okay, you know, similar to what I said before, right? Occupying spaces that were meant for us, being aware of what we said, even songs that we just sing and say whatever words without paying attention and repeating, like what's really going on around us and in our house. But how, I know you have two boys. What's going on with you on that?
I mean, one, it's terrifying because my 14-year-old looks like an adult. He's now taller than me. He has a deep voice, and he will be mistaken for an adult. I mean, if Tamir Rice can be mistaken for a violent criminal, my son is the boss. Right. So that scares me, like having him travel by himself and go to school even because, you know, they're police. Well, not now, but before COVID, there are police officers in the train station because he goes to a school in the Bronx. So he has to get on the train every day. So I worry. And it's little things that I think about that I know are wrong, but I'm like, okay, he wears a uniform, so they know he's not a criminal. Like those are real thoughts. Like I tell him to come home in his uniform. Don't come home in your gym clothes because you might be mistaken for like a hoodlum. Like you want to make sure you're dressed nice, look a certain way. Yes, sir. No, sir. Like he already knows the rules when an officer approaches you. You don't put your hands in your pockets. No sudden moves. Like we've had that conversation, and unfortunately, he's like, he asked me like, why do I have to do all this? I was like, you're a Black boy in America, and this is safer. You need to know how to navigate this world in a safe way, and it still doesn't guarantee your safety, right? So it's the truth. Even if you do everything right, it does not guarantee your safety because your skin color is what they see first. So that's the hard part about it. We spent about a month in Florida during COVID, and we rented a house, you know, just very secluded. We bought all our food, so we weren't leaving. And my son, like the oldest one, he's like, oh, Mom, can I go for a walk? I want to go for a walk. And I'm like, no, I overreacted. Like, you absolutely cannot go for a walk.
I know.
From where Trayvon Martin, like, I went on this rant of like Trayvon Martin was killed getting freaking Skittles and he had on a hoodie on top of that. And I'm like, you are absolutely not walking around this neighborhood. And I'm like, oh my, like after it happened, I felt so terrible. And I'm like, oh my God, I am that afraid. Like, my son should be able to go for a walk. Like, that is such a normal human thing. He should be able to go outside and not have me go into a panic because he has on a hoodie and he's in Florida. And we're in a neighborhood where we're renting a house and I don't know the neighbors. I don't know this neighborhood. So my initial fear is he can't go outside because they don't know him. Yes. He's a little black boy. He has a hoodie on. This is they have the right to shoot you if he happens to step on a blade of your grass.
No.
That's terrifying. So we have those conversations. Of course, I called him back. I'm like, I'm sorry. But let's take a step back. Here's why mommy that was fear, right? It was a little bit of fear and anger, because not anger at him, but like angry he couldn't even actually go for a walk. Because I was like, you know what, he should really be able to go for a walk. And then he's like, well, why don't you come with me? I was like, well, that's not any better. Me going with you just means two of us might die. So that's the reality of it. The little one, he understands. He's acutely aware. He's really smart. He calls things out. He's like, Mom, I was watching the news, and how come they always say that it was a black man, or it was a Spanish man, or it was a white man? Like, why do they always say the race? Like, and I'm like, I don't know, because it wasn't even like a criminal story. They always, describe the person's race. Yes. And he picked up on that, and I was like, oh, okay. Well, here's why. And he's really conscious about, how he's treated. And he actually goes to a school that's predominantly white. Mm-hmm. So his friends are generally, these kids running around. So like that also gets complicated when they're on their Zoom meetings and their parents don't necessarily want to have conversations with me, but they allow the kids to play. So it's a very weird dynamic. Even for us being in that school, it's like, I want him to get the right education, right? And that's where the opportunity is. With, hair. I'm like, baby, your hair doesn't spike. He's like, why? I was like, you're not, they're watching all these what do they call it? Those cartoons, the anime cartoons. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I want my hair to do that. I'm like, baby, your hair doesn't do that. So we're having conversations about hair and what he can do, what he can't do. I'm like, we can dye it, but we're going to get, spikes and that way. So he's really trying to understand what it means. Like, you're a brown boy and what you can do is different from what they can do. And you can't throw yourself on the floor and have a tantrum. They can. He's learned that because he will be disciplined a different way and it will be more aggressive. So, and it will be looked at as more aggressive. So he's aware already at 8 years old. And that's what we deal with. And that's where it becomes normal, right? Because as you're growing up, you learn to adapt to those situations so that you come out as safe as possible. It's always as safe as possible. It's like, well, how do I get out of this without damaging my reputation or safely even, right? So like, that's just how you grow up. Even for me in school growing up, my father was a criminal and I was labeled a criminal. Mm-hmm. So in kindergarten, I noticed differences in how I was treated versus how the other kids were treated. Or an address meant everything, right? I lived close to the school, but somebody living on 96th Street in 1980 something, and you're brown, that was like, you're high class. So, and that was from young, right? So like sometimes I don't even know what I'm just dealing with. Mm-hmm. Reality, because it's just so ingrained.
if you can tell, like, all these people that are asking for, um asking question, and you answer a little bit to this at the beginning, do your own homework, but in general, like, for people that want to become allies, um what's your expectation? Like, what do you expect them to do, and what will be ideal?
Ideally, it would be to be like I said it before. It's like it's just be genuine in your quest of learning and accept the person. I think there just needs to be a level of acceptance to become an ally first, and then two, it's like what we're all doing is within your purview, within what you can influence. Influence. I expect if it's you and a friend and they say something, I expect you to say something to correct it. I expect you to say, "Hey, I educated myself on this thing," and share that book or that movie or that blog or that post or whatever it is. I expect, for you to be more diverse in your friendships, because most people do not befriend people outside of their own race. For the most part, the majority looks just like you. So challenge yourself to go to the places where the people are in a safe way, of course. Don't force yourself on people, but to like,
Be my friend.
right? No, come on. You gotta, be genuine. Like if you like music and you're a genuine music fan, go where the music is and talk to other people in that venue that don't look like you, because you have something in common. Find the commonalities. Actually, that's it. Find the commonalities and build on that. Right? Don't just come in trying to impose who you are, what you do. Find something in common, and be open to the fact that we have a lot more in common than we have different. We all love food, we all love music, we all love movies, or whatever it might, reading. There are things that just about every person does, and you can connect over those things, right? So just be open, and that's what I expect. Be open and honest, and speak up when it's necessary. That's probably the most important part. You have to speak up and try to influence your community however you can, and consciously doing that, not just, oh, when it comes up I'll say, but actually really thinking about your relationships, thinking about what you can do, thinking about who's in your community and where you can be better. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
friend, for agreeing to talk to me at 7:30 a.m. in the morning. This was
Oh my
great.
gosh. Only for you. I was like, I really am gonna need that cup of coffee.
Oh, thank you.